Hi guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you a cool project and I'm going to show you how to create pendants like these. So the trick with these is actually seed beads. So if I bring this up to you and brighten it up a bit, you should be able to see that those are all seed beads in there. And we are also I'm going to show you how to create your own polymer clay bezel to pop them in. So that's the black and red version. What we're going to be doing today is a nice white and blue one, so we go with kind of an icy look. So you're going to need 2 sheets of pearl white polymer clay, and I'm using Primo, and these will run out on the thickest setting of my pasta machine. And you're also going to want some cutters. Now I'm going to be using my mirror fangle set, and you're going to need a large one and the middle one. They come in 3, so I'm going to be using the largest 2, and this is the mirror set. Now this will work with any cutters, so you don't have to use the ones that I'm using. Any cutters will work. So what you want to do is you want to create your bezel first. So we're going to take the smallest of the 2 and cut out a piece and just keep it in there. Now you'll bring over your other piece, and you're going to have to eyeball this, but you want to try and get that border nice up. My head needs to be about here. Okay. Then once you're happy, just press down and then bring over your other cutter and lay that one back into place and recut. Now move that out the way, and then I'm going to use my craft knife to remove that out the way. And that is going to be your bezel. Now I'm just going to use my cutter again to shape this back into the right shape. There we are. Okay, then clean up these edges. So you don't want those bits attached. There we are. Now what you can do is you can pop this into the oven for about 15 minutes just to set, or you can use this cool tip that I have, and it requires a heat gun. And what we want to do is you want to set the top of this. So I'm going to grab my heat gun, and you can see it's a massive heat gun, and I'm just going to cure the top layer. Just like that, and then I put it down. Now run your finger over the top once it's cooled, of course, but I'm just checking now. If your finger can slide over easily and doesn't stick, then it's cured. Wait for this to cool before you pick it up. So in the meantime, while we wait for that to cool, we can create the base. And so you're going to take your largest cutter again, which fits perfectly like that, and you are going to cut out a section of clay. Then you're going to need some sort of mica powder. Now in this one I used a base of gold, so you can see little gold veins poking through there. Today I'm going to be using a base of silver, and I'm just using ordinary mica powder. Pearl X will work just fine as well. Any metallic powder will work. Then you want to put on quite a large amount. And the reason I want to use mica powder is because you want it to be shiny behind the seed beads. And you want like really shiny, so silver clay isn't really going to work for this. And you'll just smooth that on and create a nice silver background. And I apologise for the cockatoos in the background. They're roosting in a tree outside, so there's not much I can do about them this morning. There we are. Get rid of the excess mica powder and you're ready to go with that. Now just make sure that you smooth it over properly. By now this one has cooled enough for us to lift it up. So I'll just bring over my tissue blade very delicately, and actually I'm going to use my flexible one. That one's better. Very gently lift it up. And then just clean away the excess. And be very, very careful with this because it's like so delicate. It's a potato chip has more strength in it. And you want it very carefully. Actually, I'm going to flip it for this. Very carefully go around the edges and just trim away any of those straggly bits. Because you don't want any of that. Just like that. Then I'm just going to blow and I'll pick it up with my blade again. I'm just going to use my finger to smooth it off. You have to be so careful with this. And this is why I'm saying if you want to, you can cure this in the oven. But the advantage of the heat gun and just seeing the top is it does keep it in its shape. It's very delicate, but this bottom half over here is still raw. And so it means that it will bond with your clay much better. And you won't have to be putting poly paste and things like that all over the place. Okay, and then I'm going to line it up and press. And now I might have to put poly paste on if it doesn't stick properly, but usually it sticks just fine. There we are. Then I'll bring over my cutter and I'll cut over it just to press everything into the right shape, and then I'll lift that out the way. And then I'm going to use my blade to just smooth these edges. And then I'll bring over another tool to help me smooth it even more. And this is a tool that I got from creatorlong.com, and it really does work quite well when it comes to smoothing off edges. So you get this nice base. And it comes in a set, so this is just one in the set. Okay. Then I'm just going to use my blade to get rid of this excess over here. And this part's quite important. You want to spend your time making sure that this part is perfect, because there's not really much room for mistakes. Now, if you didn't feel like making your own bezel, I do sell them on my Etsy shop, Jessama Design on Etsy. So if you want to go check those out, you can. But you can also make your own. Okay, and I'm just going to use my cutter one last time to make sure that it is in shape. It must be in shape. Okay, and so then what I'll do is I'll pop this entire tile in the oven for a full hour to make sure that everything bakes properly. And I'm not going to pick it up off of the tile because things might get unstuck and things like that. So you want to just pop this entire thing in the oven. And just before you do, check the sides to make sure that it has stuck, because if it hasn't, that's a problem. Okay, I'll go pop that in the oven and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so I've made a bunch of bezels and put them in the oven for about an hour at Primo's recommended temperature. And so you can see I've made a whole bunch. And so these are the pearl ones, and I've made a gold one, a silver one, and then one with just a plain pearl back. And then I've made some black ones with, again, silver, gold, and then a plain pearl back. I don't want a plain black back because the seed beads wouldn't really show up against that. So now what we need to do is we want to add a backing. As you can see, these backings aren't very tidy. So I'll put those off to the side and bring over a sheet of pearl white, and this was rolled out on the middle setting of my pasta machine, which is A4. And I also brought over a few texture stamps that I want to use. So I want to use my icicle, my frozen fracture stamp, and all of these stamps are available on my Etsy shop, so if you want to go and check them out, I have a link in the description below, but you can use any texture stamp you want. So this is my frozen fractures one, this is my leopard one, my starburst one, I do believe, or it could be a starburst moss actually, and then my mushroom one. And so those are the ones that I'm going to be using. So all you're going to need is a spray bottle, and you just want to give your clay a good spritz of water. And then you also want to bring over your stamp and give it a spritz. You can also use cornstarch if you want to. It's just I don't really like using cornstarch, especially in this sort of situation, because it's definitely a very good release agent, but when applying it to the back of your beads you need it to stick to your clay, and so I find that when using cornstarch it can get into places that I don't want it to get to, and so I can end up having pieces of clay not sticking where I want them to stick, which is of course problematic. So there we are, and I'll just gently lift that out of the stamp. Okay, and there we are, you can see we have a nice fracture. Now I'm going to just trim that out of the sheet. Yeah, and I'll move that out of the way. And then you want to dry this thoroughly. Okay, and so once you've done that, just put that off to the side for a moment, and I'll bring over the bead that I want to put on, and I'm going to put on the silver one because I just think that this one would look really nice with kind of a ice theme around it, so that's the one that is going to get this texture. Then I want to bring over some bacon bond, and I'm just going to put a little bit on the back to help it adhere. There you go. And poly paste will work as well, and really any liquid clay will work actually. It's just that the bacon bond's the one that I prefer because it's not as liquidy, or it's more sticky than the other liquid clays, and so it doesn't slosh around all over the place, and it means that when you put your sheet over it, it sticks in place and doesn't slide all over the place. Okay, so when you've done that, bring over your piece, just gently pop it on and just gently tap it on. Then I'll flip, and then I'm going to use my craft knife to trim it instead of my cutter, because it will just, my craft knife will do a better job, because your clay can shrink a little bit, or it could have been slightly distorted in the baking process, and so I find that it's better to use my craft knife. Just checking the back there. Okay, then I'll move that out the way, then we'll check the back, and now you just want to slide your finger along the edges just to smooth them up. Now we are going to do a smear along these edges to make sure that everything looks nice and neat and tidy, but you also just want to smooth off these edges and get rid of any sharp points. I like it to have almost like a beveled look to it. Okay, and then I'm thinking that we're probably going to antique this, but I'll do that later on. Okay, so that's that one, and that's with the icicle one. So I'm going to go and do these ones, probably with a whole bunch of different textures, depending on what I think the theme should be around it. and then I'll pop them into the oven for another half an hour at a pretty much recommended temperature, and then I can show you how to clean up the sides. Okay, so here they are out of the oven, and so I've done the backs, and I want to just show you the textures that we have. So we have the starburst one, we have the icicles, the frozen fractures one, then we have my burnt wood one, my mushroom one, my leopard one, and then my coral polyp, I do believe it was. But those ones are the backs. Now I might antique the backs, but I'll do that later if I'm going to. For now I want to clean up these sides, which are not great. So I'll use this one as an obvious example. And you're going to need, for the ones with the black bezel borders, you're going to need black clay, and the ones with the white borders, you're going to need the white clay, just so it blends in. So here's a piece of black I have. I'm just rolling that out into a cylinder and warming it up. And then I'm just going to apply that to the side of my bead and smear along the side. There we are. And I'm just really forcing it into those cracks and making it stick to the bead, because it's something that doesn't like sticking all that well. Especially if the clay is dry. So if this bit of clay is too dry, mix some liquid clay into it to make sure that it is nice and soft for you, because otherwise it's going to be very hard to smear it along the edge. And now another way to get rid of fingerprints and things like that is to just wet the surface, and then it just moves a bit easier. So I'm just using a wet wipe here to smooth that up. Then check the top and smooth away any crumbles, same with the back, and just continue going around the bead, or the bezel, whatever you want to call it, until you have covered up all of the edges. So you can see at that edge versus that edge, that one looks worse, that one looks much better. And so this is my favourite way of finishing off the edges. You could also use liquid clay. I've also done a video on a technique using black liquid clay to do this sort of thing. Looks quite a bit different, but if you're having trouble with this, you can always try the black liquid clay technique. So I'll provide a link to that. And I also have a tutorial that goes a little bit more into depth on the smear technique, so that it makes it a little bit easier for you. So I'll continue doing this and cleaning up the sides, getting rid of fingerprints and all sorts of things until I'm happy with it, and I'll do the same for all of the other bezels. Okay, so they're out of the oven. Their sides are all nice and tidy, as you can see. So now what we want to do is you want to give them a good sand, because you can see that this black has sparkly pearl bits on it, and the back has a bit of mica powder accidentally on it. So we need to clean these up. So I'll bring over my sandpaper, and I'm going to be using 400 grit, and these I got off of Fire Mountain Gems. I do believe they're called polishing papers or polishing cloths, one of the two. And I'll actually use this one as an example for you. And so you just want to start sanding the back, sides and front. And we'll start on the 400 and work our way up. So you want to really give it a good sand. And we'll also give it a wash after we've sanded it to get all the stuff out of the grooves. So just make sure to sand the sides as well. You don't want any of these pearly bits, so that side should look plain, and you can see that this side's sparkly. Well, that side's starting to look more plain. That's what you want to look for. So you'll just sand the sides like that until you're happy. You'll also sand the front. Be careful not to get into the bezel though, because you don't want to be sanding the area where the mica powder is. That would be quite disastrous. So you want to sand the front as well. So I'll do that with all of the bezels, which can take quite a while. And I'll go through all of the grits from the 400 up to an 8000, and then I'll show you what they look like. Right, So I have finished sanding them, so you can see that they have a nice shine to them, and you can see that the back has a nice shine as well, and so do the edges. And the black ones do as well. So now if you have any bits in the gaps, just go and gently run it under some water and just scrape it out with a little bit of a toothbrush, so I'll probably do that with that one. But other than that, it's fine. So I gave them a quick buff on the Dremel, so you can see, so that they have a nice shine to them. But now we are basically ready to start using them. So all of these, I haven't put any Renaissance wax on them for the reason that I do intend to put them back in the oven again, so I prefer not to put a varnish on until after I have finished all of the baking processes. And basically I do want to just put resin on these, so I don't really need to put Renaissance wax on them. So now we'll move on to putting some seed beads into them. Okay, so now we are ready to apply our seed beads. So you're going to first need some liquid clay, and I've chosen to use translucent Kato poly clay, and you can see that I've used this bottle for quite a long time. Now the reason you want to do this is because it just helps your beads stick, so you don't want too much liquid clay, and you want it to be a fairly translucent liquid clay, so bake and bond isn't going to work. Fimo gel will work. There was another liquid clay as well. As soon as I finish brushing this on, I'll go and check for you. But just choose a fairly translucent brand, and you don't need a lot. You just need enough that the seed beads, once they're in place, aren't going to be rolling around all over the place, but they'll still be movable. So just paint this into all the corners and everything, and it also will help seal in that mica powder before you get to the resin pot, which is a nice added bonus if you didn't want to put resin on. But it is quite, with the seed beads you do want to put resin on, because they have a habit of popping out of the liquid clay because they don't bond very well to it. Polymer clay and glass don't really bond, so this is just mostly to stick them in place so that they can bake properly, and then be very careful with them until we've popped the resin on. Okay, so now that I've painted all of those edges, I'm going to go and let that sit for just a little while, maybe a minute or so, just to let the liquid clay settle, and I'll go find out what that other one was. Here we are. Sculpey Clear Transparent. Yeah. So that's the one that I was talking about. That one is pretty translucent, and it's also quite it's got a nice consistency. You can brush it around really easily. The bacon bond's just a bit too it's just a bit too thick for my liking. Okay, so now we're going to use our seed beads. Now I like to pour them out ahead of time, and now I'm just using the cap here to hopefully prevent them from spilling too much all over the place, because I don't like leaving my these things open with the caps open, because then you're just asking for your elbow to bump it or something like that, and then you end up with a horrible spill. So I like to pour out the beads, get them onto the tile carefully and try not to mix them all up, and pop them into a nice little pile, and then go and instantly close this up, because I've had some very sad days when I've knocked over my seed beads and then they go all over the place. It's just a pain. Now that should be enough seed beads for now. You're also going to need some sort of a needle tool to push your beads around. A brush isn't going to work because it's going to stick to your brush. You're going to need some sort of metal device to poke it around. So I like this bead this piercing bit that I got from Fire Mountain Gems, but needles will work as well, so you can pop the beads on there and it works nicely. Now I want to start with the white colour because it is closest to this colour around the edge, which is important for this technique. Now just pick it up and slide it into place. Pick it up, slide it into place. And you want to put them up with their holes up, just like that. and then you'll go around the rim. Sometimes you have to slide them off, and then just clean it every now and then. Just wipe off any liquid clay residue, because then the beads stick to the pendant. You don't want that. And now you want to try, you don't have to worry too much at this point because they're not meeting, but once they meet over here, you're going to have to select the size of seed beads, because generally you have larger seed beads and smaller seed beads, and you want them to fit quite nicely into a perfect or somewhat perfect border. So you might have to be careful what size you select. You might need a bigger one or a smaller one just to fill in the space perfectly. So I'll continue round like this until I've reached the spot where I want to join, and I'll show you what I do there. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of our line here, and you can see it's really starting to look quite nice. But now we need to be quite selective about our beads. So I think we'll put in one large one, see how much space we have, and then I'll bring over this smaller one and see if it will fit. Yeah, there we go. But see, if I'd taken another larger one, it wouldn't have fit. So you just need to be careful what beads you select. Okay, so now we've finished the outer layer. We want to move on to the next color, which should be a a lighter color of what you want to do. So in my case, I want to do blue, but maybe if you wanted to do green, you would start out with a fairly light green and then go towards a darker green, because you want to get almost like a color gradient so that your eyes start to focus, end up focusing on the middle, and then you can look outwards. So I've got this light turquoise, and I'm going to start fitting that around the edge. Now you might see that this space over here is going to be a little tricky, so select which beads you want to put there carefully. See, that one fits quite well. Now I want to put two more small ones around the edge. And I'm going to look for a really small one now. Here's quite a small one. Let's see if I can get that to fit in there. There we go. And this is why I like the liquid clay over glue, because you can move it around as you want. So there you can see that fits quite snugly. So you just need to be careful what beads you choose, and this is why I like to pour them out into a nice pile over here so that I can see exactly what I'm working with, instead of having to go and drag them all over the place. There we go. And those two meet together quite nicely. And now we'll start splitting it apart, because it's starting, the area is starting to widen out. Okay, and just check from time to time that all of your beads are flat, because you do want that. And then just continue going round. And then the next colour that I would move on to is this darker kind of sky blue colour. Then I'm going to go more into this, I guess, baby blue colour. And then I'm going to go into this really dark navy colour, right in the middle. So, I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I have filled in all of the spaces. So you can see that the white ring's definitely the most tidy, and the turquoise one's pretty okay. And then you can see as we go here that we have to really vary the sizes to get them to all fit together. And then as we get into this inner ring over here, it can get a little trickier, so you need to kind of spend some time fitting it all together, kind of like you would a puzzle. And so this last little bit over here is going to be the most tricky. So just spend your time, go slowly, and fit it all together. It's kind of like doing a puzzle. So now you've got them all together, you want to pop this into the oven for about half an hour to cure that liquid clay, and then we can apply resin to the top, which is quite important for the effect, because it's going to, with these seed beads, they have a silver lining in the hole, and then the rest is translucent glass. So you want to try and get seed beads like that, where they have a nice silver lining in the hole, or a gold lining, some sort of metal lining, and you want to have the glass to be translucent. You don't want opaque glass. I got these off of Fire Mountain Gems, if you were wondering. And then you would put the resin on it, and it kind of turns the glass even more translucent, and so it looks like there's lots and lots and lots of little bubbles. So if I show you this, you can see it looks like there's lots and lots of little bubbles where that silver lining is. So it's very important to pop the resin on, especially for protection. So I wouldn't recommend doing this project if you don't plan to do the resin on it. But anyway, I'll pop this in the oven for half an hour and then we can get onto resining. Okay, so now that this is out of the oven, we want to let it cool completely, which I have. And so you can see all of those seed beads are nicely stuck in there. You can turn it upside down and they're not going to fall out, which is very important because when you put the resin in there, it's going to cause things to move around if they're not stuck in nicely. So that's why I like putting the liquid clay. Now, just a note, if you wanted to make this one, instead of this one, this was using this border, the gold background and the black border. This one I painted the sides with gold mica powder, and I had a different backing and I antiqued that with some gold mica powder as well, but I prefer this one personally. And this one had browns, quite dark brown seed beads, red seed beads, yellow seed beads, and then gold seed beads. All of them translucent and with silver linings, just like with these ones. So if you wanted to make this one, that is all you would have to do. Basically the exact same technique, but the shape is a reverse. So I have a mirror fangle set. The one that we're working with today is the mirror set. This is the fangle set. So if you wanted to go check that out, that is on my Etsy shop. But basically you can make that just by swapping the colours, and you can end up with this. And so I guess this is going to be called my fire and ice tutorial, since we're doing ice and that is my fire one. So anyway, now we're ready to mix up our resin. Now I prefer using a 2-part resin in this case because we have so many little bits and bobs in here that it's a little bit risky to use a 1-part resin where you're going to need a UV light, because you're risking that you're going to get resin maybe under the seed beads or in places where the UV light can't reach it, and then that's going to stay sticky. So I personally prefer using a 2-part resin, and ice resin is my favourite. If you've been watching me a while, you'll know. And I like this because I have a plunger now that I got from Linda's Art Spot that measures out the ice resin for me perfectly. So I don't have to worry about getting the measurements wrong. I just have to make sure that I mix it properly. So I'll just get this top off. I'll just do that. Can get a little bit gunky, so you clean it every now and then. Then let the bubbles rise so that you have just resin and hardener on the bottoms, like that. Let me just move this out and let me zoom you out a bit so that you can see what I'm doing. There. And then press with equal pressure on the plunger. And this allows you to measure out as little or as much resin as you want. Okay. Then let everything drip and then suck the plunger back up so you suck the resin back in so you don't have any drips. Okay, and then I'll pop that back on and close it. Then I'll bring over my skewer and I'll start mixing this. And I'll spend about 5 minutes mixing this because I want to make sure that it is thoroughly mixed, because that is actually what has caused my resin not to cure for the most part. Measuring it actually is not that difficult once you get used to it. It's faster to just have a plunger, but measuring it's not that difficult. It's the mixing that you just need to make sure that you do properly. So just mix it for 5 minutes just to be sure, even if you can't see any more streaks in the resin. Just be safe and mix longer, because if it's not mixed properly it won't cure. And then in this project's case you will have to start again, because if you try to pull the resin off, or if it's really not cured, you'll have to wipe it off. Your seed beads will be messed up and you'll just have to throw it away. So just make sure that you thoroughly mix this. It's just time, don't worry about it, just make sure that you mix it correctly. And so I'll mix this for about 5 minutes, and then I'll let it rest for another minute to make sure that the air bubbles rise to the surface. And then we can pop those. And then we can pour it into the mould. But just please make sure that you mix it properly, because having sticky resin is just disastrous. Okay, so now we will move on to the next step. So excuse the horrible red mat. It's the only colour I could get. I tried getting a blue one, but can't get it. Oh well. So now we'll bring it over our blue, which is clashing terribly. The black at least somewhat matches. And I'll just turn this up a tad more for you. There you go. Okay, and all the bubbles have risen to the surface and I've blown on it with a straw to get rid of the bubbles. Now we're just gently going to drip it into the bead. Now I want to drip it in certain areas, and I don't want to flood it because it's going to take a little while to sink into the in between the beads. So just drip it on in little drops and let it sink in. So go slowly with this. And I'm just doing the seed beads for the moment. I'm not going to be doing the outside border just yet. So just want to concentrate on this for the moment. You can see the areas where the resin is and the areas where it's not, because the seed beads actually go kind of cloudy, which is quite nice. You can see these clear ones really blend into the background, which is quite nice. Okay, and I'm just slowly dripping it in. Once you've got a bit in, it actually starts moving a bit faster. And you'd be surprised how much resin is actually used. You'd think that being that there's a whole bunch of seed beads in there that you wouldn't have to use much resin. It actually turns out you do have to use quite a bit of resin for this. I mixed about 2.5 mils, maybe a little bit less, and I'm going to use it all up. I can see that I'm going to use it all up. Then I'll just pop the rest into the middle rather than onto the edges. And then I'll just gently stroke the resin across the edges. That's easier and safer, because you don't want drips. Just bring it right up to those edges. Right. So now what I need to do is I'm just going to pop the rest of the resin on there, and then I'm going to go put that off to the side. Now what I need is I need some sort of a pin, and I'm just going to be using this piercing pin to work the resin into these areas where the seed beads are, because otherwise you'll get some air bubbles. And the air bubbles are okay, but they're not the best. So if you can get them out, try to get them out. And just by worrying the resin, you can generally get them out. Just kind of dig at them. And so I'd spend quite a while doing that. And once they're to the surface, you can actually fix them up just by blowing gently with a straw. So you can see that I'm really getting out quite a few air bubbles here. Just be careful, because you don't want to cause spills. So while you're doing this, just be careful. There we go. So I'll just continue working at this, getting these air bubbles out as much as I can, and then I'll show you what they look like. Okay. So I've worked out most of the bubbles. Now I'm going to be very careful lifting this up and moving this out of the way, because it's so ugly. But here, I just want to show you what they look like. So hopefully you can see that most of the cores of the seed beads have bubbles in them. That is the goal. You want to try and keep bubbles in the seed bead cores. If you can't do that, that's fine. You can see that some of them don't have bubbles in them, like this one over here doesn't have a bubble in it. That's perfectly fine, but most of them have bubbles in them, and that is what's going to achieve the effect. So don't worry about working out those, you just want the ones in between the seed beads. And so again, that is why I like putting liquid clay in and almost sealing the seed beads into liquid clay so that they stick, because when you're digging out those air bubbles, it's very hard. It's going to be very hard to do that if your seed beads are floating all over the place. So it's definitely worth doing that. So now you want to let this sit and cure for around 24 hours. And do that on a silicone mat, aka the horrible red thing. And then I can come and show you what to do with it. We're going to need to drill a hole in a few things. Okay, so these have finished curing, and so you can see that the resin has cured, and so now we can mess with these and see what they look like and tilt them around to see what the effect looks like. So hopefully you can see how nice that looks. This one of course was cured beforehand anyway. So now what we can do is we can drill them. Now before we put the seed beads in, if you'd wanted a bail, you could have definitely added a bail to the back, but I don't really want a bail. So now what you would want to do is you would want to drill a hole through your bead, and I'm just using a pen drill, an automatic one that is, which helps me drill a hole, and I'm going to drill it through this side. Now I'm not going to string this or anything like this, but you can add any sort of stringing method you want. You could add chain, you could maybe make some extra bezels if you wanted, maybe some smaller fangle bezels, and add some more seed beads to create some more beads on this side. There's lots of things that you could do with it. But anyway, that's basically it. You would just drill a hole there. That's pretty easy. And just make sure before you string it to just pop your drill through there, clean it out so that your stringing will fit, and then you can start stringing it. So that's basically it for my fire and ice tutorial, and so I do hope that that was helpful to you, and if it was, please do let me know, as that is always helpful. And please do check out my Etsy shop to buy the bezels for this project if you don't feel like making your own, and to buy the cutters, as well as I have my fangle cutters over there. And as always, I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.